The blood hadn't dried yet when Jenny Martin saw the headline flash across her phone screen: "Paparazzi photographer found dead in Midtown alley." She dropped her coffee cup. It shattered against the marble floor of her penthouse kitchen, sending ceramic shards and dark liquid spreading like a twisted mirror of the crime scene. Photo splashed across every news outlet in New York. Tommy Hendricks was dead. The same Tommy who'd cornered her outside Sardi's 3 nights ago, waving his camera like a weapon and promising to destroy her career with photos that didn't exist. The same Tommy she'd threatened in front of a dozen witnesses. "I'll deal with you," she'd hissed, her voice carrying more venom than she'd ever summoned for any role. "Count on it." Now he was gone, and the police would come asking questions she couldn't answer. Jenny had built her empire on transformation. At 28, she was America's sweetheart, the actress who could become anyone: grieving widow, seductive spy, innocent girl next door. Critics called her supernatural. If only they knew how close to the truth they were dancing. She'd felt it for months now, the sensation of being watched. Not by fans or photographers, but by something else. Something that made her skin prickle and her pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with stage fright. The feeling was strongest during those 3 nights each month when the moon hung full and heavy over Manhattan's skyline. The gifts had started 6 months ago. Never anything threatening: white roses left at her dressing room door, expensive chocolates delivered to her apartment, a first-edition copy of her favorite novel appearing on her nightstand though she'd changed the locks twice. No cards, no signatures, just an overwhelming scent of pine and leather that clung to everything like a territorial claim. Her publicist called it an obsessed fan. Her security team called it a stalker. Jenny called it a problem she couldn't afford, not when she was 3 weeks away from starting production on the film that would finally prove she deserved the Oscar that had slipped through her fingers twice before. She grabbed her phone, hands shaking as she scrolled through the news coverage. The details made her stomach turn. Tommy had been found at dawn by a jogger, his body crumpled behind a dumpster in an alley off 8th Avenue. The photos were gruesome: deep gashes across his throat and wrists that police attributed to a knife attack, though something about the wounds looked wrong. Too ragged. Too wild. But it was the note that made her blood freeze. "Any wolf who hunts my mate will face the alpha's justice." The reporter called it a gang signature, evidence of some new territorial war playing out in the city's shadows. Jenny knew better. She'd grown up in a small Montana town where old stories still carried weight, where her grandmother spoke in whispers about things that hunted in the dark. She recognized the language of predators. Her phone buzzed. Detective Sarah Chen, NYPD. "Miss Martins? I'm sorry to bother you so early, but we need to discuss your relationship with Tommy Hendricks." Jenny stared at her reflection in the kitchen window, seeing not America's beloved actress but a woman who'd somehow become prey in a hunt she didn't understand. Beyond the glass, Central Park stretched green and inviting in the morning sun, hiding whatever shadows had swallowed Tommy whole. "Of course, Detective. I'll be right down." She ended the call and walked to her bedroom, each step measured and precise like the movements she'd perfected for countless scenes. But this wasn't a role she could shed when the cameras stopped rolling. This was her life, and someone, something, had decided she belonged to them. In her walk-in closet, she reached for a conservative black dress, something suitable for discussing murder with the police. Her fingers brushed against the silk, and for a moment she caught that scent again: pine and leather and something wild that made her heart race. Mark Bullion had been watching her for 3 years, though she'd never seen his face. He knew her schedule better than her assistant, understood her fears better than her therapist, craved her presence with an intensity that bordered on madness. Each full moon brought waves of possessive rage that left him pacing his penthouse like a caged animal, fighting the urge to claim what he'd already decided was his. He'd meant to be subtle, patient. Werewolves who lived among humans learned control or they didn't live long. But Tommy Hendricks had crossed a line, threatening to expose and humiliate the woman who belonged to the alpha of Manhattan's hidden pack. The photographer's death had been quick, merciful compared to what Mark's wolf wanted to do. 3 slashes across the throat, 2 across the wrists, designed to look like gang violence to human investigators who wouldn't recognize the precise marks of an alpha's claws. The note had been a calculated risk, but necessary. Other supernatural predators needed to understand that Jenny Martins was under his protection. Anyone who threatened his mate would answer to him personally. From his office window 40 floors above the street, Mark watched Jenny emerge from her building and slip into the back of a black sedan. Even from this distance, he could catch traces of her scent on the morning breeze, vanilla and jasmine, and something uniquely hers that called to every instinct he possessed. She looked shaken, vulnerable in a way that made his protective instincts surge. The police would question her, might even consider her a suspect. The thought of anyone causing her additional stress made his hands curl into claws. Soon, he decided. Soon he would introduce himself properly, help her understand the new reality of her world. But first, he needed to ensure no other threats remained. Tommy Hendricks had been just one photographer among dozens who circled her like vultures. His assistant knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege reserved for pack members who'd earned his absolute trust. "The police are calling it gang violence," Marcus reported, setting a tablet on Mark's desk. No supernatural markers identified. The detective assigned to the case has a reputation for closing files quickly. Mark nodded, scanning the news coverage with satisfaction. Human law enforcement would follow their predictable patterns, looking for human motivations and human suspects. They'd question Jenny, perhaps investigate her briefly, then move on to more likely perpetrators. "What about the other photographers?" he asked. "Being handled. Nothing that will raise suspicions, but they're receiving clear messages about shifting their attention elsewhere." "Good." Mark turned back to the window, tracking Jenny's sedan as it disappeared into morning traffic. "Double her security detail. She doesn't need to know about it, but I want eyes on her every moment she's outside her apartment." "Already arranged." Mark smiled, feeling the familiar surge of anticipation that accompanied the full moon's approach. In 3 days, his control would be tested again, his need for her reaching levels that bordered on dangerous. But this time would be different. This time, she would begin to understand the truth about the world she'd unknowingly entered. Tommy Hendricks had been a warning shot, a demonstration of the power that now protected her. The real hunt was just beginning, and Jenny Martins, whether she realized it or not, was no longer merely America's sweetheart. She was the alpha's mate. And in Mark Bullion's world, that made her the most precious and dangerous thing in all of New York City. Chapter 2. The police station's fluorescent lights had turned Jenny's world into a nightmare of questions she couldn't answer and accusations she couldn't deny. Detective Chen's voice echoed in her head as she stumbled through the revolving door onto the street. "We know you threatened him, Miss Martins. We have witnesses. We'll be in touch." 3 hours of interrogation had left her feeling stripped raw, every carefully constructed layer of her public persona peeled away until she was just a terrified woman who'd made a stupid threat at exactly the wrong time. The paparazzi outside the precinct had been rabid, their cameras flashing like strobe lights as she'd pushed through their wall of bodies and shouted questions. "Jenny. Did you kill Tommy Hendricks? How does it feel to be a murder suspect? Is this the end of your career?" Now she stood on the sidewalk at 10 o'clock at night, her black dress wrinkled, her carefully styled hair falling in defeated waves around her shoulders. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop, her agent, her publicist, her lawyer, all of them demanding immediate conferences to discuss damage control. But Jenny couldn't focus on their strategic planning when every news van in the city seemed to be parked outside her building. She needed to disappear, at least for tonight. Somewhere the cameras couldn't find her, somewhere she could think clearly about how her life had imploded in less than 12 hours. Central Park stretched before her, its dark paths offering the anonymity she craved. She'd walked these same routes 1,000 times during her years in the city, finding peace among the trees when the pressures of fame became too heavy. Tonight, the familiar trails felt like her only refuge. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she entered the park, the sound echoing off the surrounding buildings before being swallowed by the rustle of leaves overhead. The autumn air carried the scent of dying leaves and approaching winter, but underneath it all, that strange pine and leather smell that had been haunting her for months seemed stronger than ever. She'd made it perhaps half a mile into the park when the footsteps began. Not the casual pace of other late-night walkers, but the deliberate rhythm of someone following her path. Jenny's pulse quickened, every instinct screaming at her to run, but her legs felt leaden with exhaustion and fear. "Miss Martins?" The voice came from behind her, deep and smooth with a hint of an accent she couldn't place. Jenny spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for the pepper spray in her purse. The man emerging from the shadows looked like he'd stepped off a magazine cover. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that caught the moonlight and eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully maintained composure. He wore an expensive suit that somehow managed to look casual, as if he'd thrown on a $1,000 jacket to take an evening stroll through the park. "I'm sorry to startle you," he continued, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm Mark Bullion. I've been following your career for some time." The name meant nothing to her, but something about his presence made her skin tingle with awareness. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each step calculated and precise, yet there was something oddly comforting about his steady gaze. "I don't give autographs in Central Park at 10 at night," Jenny said, trying to inject some of her usual confidence into her voice. "Especially not today." Mark's smile was gentle, understanding. "I'm not looking for an autograph. I saw the news coverage. I know what you're going through, and I wanted to offer my help." "Help?" Jenny laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Unless you can make the NYPD forget I ever threatened Tommy Hendricks, I don't think there's anything you can do for me." "Actually, there might be." Mark took a step closer, and Jenny caught that intoxicating scent again, pine and leather and something wild that made her pulse quicken. "I have resources, connections. More importantly, I have a place where you can disappear for a while, somewhere the media can't find you." Jenny studied his face, looking for the telltale signs of another opportunist trying to exploit her vulnerability. She'd dealt with enough of them over the years to recognize the type. But Mark Bullion's expression held only sincere concern, and something else, a protective intensity that made her feel safer than she had all day. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Mark replied softly. "I know you're innocent. I know you're scared. And I know you need someone on your side right now." The words hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had simply believed in her innocence without demanding proof or explanations? Her agent had spent their entire phone conversation discussing plea bargains. Her publicist had started planning her image rehabilitation before they'd even finished processing the charges. But this stranger, this Mark Bullion, stood in the moonlight offering her exactly what she needed most, faith. "Where?" she whispered. "My home. It's private. Secluded. The kind of place where you can rest and figure out your next move without every reporter in the city breathing down your neck." Jenny glanced around the empty park, suddenly aware of how isolated she was. Meeting a strange man in Central Park at night violated every safety rule she'd learned in her years of navigating the city. But the alternative was returning to her building, where the news vans waited like vultures, or checking into a hotel where some employee would inevitably sell her location to the highest bidder. "How do I know you're not just another predator looking to take advantage?" she asked. Mark's expression darkened for just a moment, something fierce and protective flashing in his eyes. "Because predators don't offer sanctuary, Miss Martins. They create victims. I'm offering you a chance to be neither." Something in his tone convinced her. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the way he seemed to radiate calm strength in the midst of her chaos. Either way, Jenny found herself nodding. "Okay. But I drive myself, and I want the address up front." "Of course." Mark pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. The address was in the Upper East Side, a neighborhood where privacy came standard and questions were rarely asked. "I'll follow you, make sure you arrive safely." 20 minutes later, Jenny stood before a mansion that belonged in European aristocracy, not Manhattan real estate. The building rose 4 stories above the street, its stone facade elegant and imposing behind wrought iron gates that opened silently at their approach. Manicured gardens flanked the entrance, and warm lights spilled from windows that somehow managed to look welcoming rather than ostentatious. "You live here alone?" Jenny asked as Mark guided her up the front steps. "I have staff," he replied, producing a key that looked more like an antique than modern security. But they're discreet. Your privacy will be absolute. The front door opened before Mark could use his key, revealing a woman in her 30s with striking silver hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. She wore simple black clothing that somehow managed to look both professional and predatory. "Diana," Mark said by way of introduction. "This is Miss Martins. She'll be staying with us for a while." Diana's smile was perfect, polished, and completely devoid of warmth. "Of course. Welcome to the Bullion residence, Miss Martins. I've prepared the blue suite for you. Diana manages my household," Mark explained as they entered a foyer that could have housed Jenny's entire apartment. "She'll make sure you have everything you need." Jenny nodded, though something about Diana's steady gaze made her feel like a specimen under examination. The woman moved with predatory grace, her steps silent on the marble floor as she led them deeper into the house. The blue suite turned out to be larger than most hotel rooms, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered views of a private garden lit by subtle landscape lighting. The furniture was antique but comfortable, and someone had thoughtfully provided a selection of books and magazines on the nightstand. "I'll leave you to get settled," Diana said, her voice carrying a slight accent that Jenny couldn't identify. "If you need anything, just press the button beside the bed. Someone will respond immediately." When Diana left, Mark lingered in the doorway, his presence somehow both comforting and unsettling. "Are you hungry? My chef can prepare something light." "I'm not sure I could eat," Jenny admitted, sinking into an armchair that probably cost more than most people's cars. "This whole day feels like a nightmare I can't wake up from." Mark entered the room and closed the door behind him, the soft click somehow final. "Tell me what happened. From the beginning." So Jenny did. She found herself pouring out the entire story: Tommy's threats, her public response, the police interrogation, the media circus waiting outside her building. Mark listened without interruption, his dark eyes never leaving her face, and gradually Jenny felt some of the tension bleeding from her shoulders. "The police think I killed him," she finished. "They're building a case around my threat, looking for evidence to support what they've already decided is true." "And you have no idea who might have actually done it?" Mark asked. Jenny shook her head. Tommy was a bottom feeder, but he had enemies all over the city. Any celebrity he'd harassed over the years, any publication he'd stolen photos from, any. She trailed off, remembering the note found beside Tommy's body. "Any wolf who hunts my mate will face the alpha's justice." The words had seemed like gang nonsense when she'd first read them, but now, sitting in Mark's elegant sanctuary, they felt ominous in a way she couldn't explain. "What is it?" Mark asked, his voice sharp with concern. "The note," Jenny said slowly. "The one they found with Tommy's body. It talked about wolves and mates and alpha justice. Like something out of a nature documentary." Mark's expression didn't change, but Jenny could have sworn she saw something flash in his eyes. Gangs use all kinds of territorial language. It probably doesn't mean anything specific. But even as he said it, Jenny caught that scent again, pine and leather and wild things that had no place in Manhattan mansions. For just a moment, Mark looked less like a concerned citizen and more like something dangerous wearing human skin. The moment passed so quickly Jenny wondered if she'd imagined it. Mark's smile returned, warm and reassuring, and he moved to pour her a glass of water from the crystal pitcher on the side table. "You're safe here," he said, handing her the glass. "That's what matters right now." Jenny accepted the water gratefully, her throat dry from hours of talking to police and reporters. The liquid was cool and pure, better than anything that came from New York's municipal system. "I can't stay long. My lawyer will want to prep me for whatever comes next." "Of course. But tonight, you rest. Tomorrow, we'll figure out how to clear your name." "We?" Jenny looked up at him sharply. Mark settled into the chair across from her, his movements fluid and controlled. "If you'll let me help. I have connections in the legal system, resources that could be useful. And..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I care about what happens to you." "You don't even know me," Jenny protested, but her heart was beating faster at the intensity in his gaze. "I know more than you think," Mark said softly. "I told you I've been following your career, but it's more than that. I've admired you from afar for years, Jenny. Your talent, your strength, the way you've built something extraordinary in this city. When I saw you needed help, I couldn't stand by and do nothing." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither of them had expected to cross. Jenny set down her water glass with trembling fingers, suddenly aware of how alone they were in this beautiful room. That's very kind," she managed. "But I'm not looking for a relationship right now. My life is complicated enough." Mark's smile was understanding but didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm not asking for a relationship, Jenny. I'm asking for the chance to protect you." "From what?" "From whoever killed Tommy Hendricks. From the police who want to railroad you for a crime you didn't commit. From the media that's determined to destroy your reputation." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "Let me be your shield." Jenny stared at him, torn between gratitude and suspicion. Everything about Mark Bullion seemed too good to be true: his wealth, his concern, his apparent lack of ulterior motives. In her experience, men who offered to be her shield usually wanted something in return. "What do you get out of this?" she asked directly. Mark was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her shiver. "The knowledge that you're safe. That's enough for me." But it wasn't enough for Jenny. She'd spent too many years in Hollywood learning to read between the lines, to spot the angles people worked when they thought she wasn't paying attention. Mark Bullion wanted something, even if he wasn't ready to admit it yet. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Diana appeared in the doorway, her expression professionally neutral. "Forgive the interruption," she said. "Lucas is here with the evening reports." Mark nodded, rising from his chair with that fluid grace that seemed to be his trademark. "I'll leave you to rest. We can talk more in the morning." He paused at the door, looking back at Jenny with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Sleep well. You're safe here." When he left, Jenny locked the door behind him and leaned against it, her heart still racing from their conversation. Safe. The word echoed in her mind like a promise and a threat rolled into one. She'd thought she was safe in her penthouse apartment, behind her security system and doorman. She'd thought she was safe in her carefully constructed public image, insulated by fame and success from the kind of violence that had claimed Tommy Hendricks. But safety, she was beginning to understand, was an illusion. And Mark Bullion, for all his wealth and apparent concern, might be the most dangerous illusion of all. In his study 3 floors below, Mark stood before a wall of windows that offered a commanding view of the city. Diana and Lucas Sterling flanked him, their postures respectful but alert. "How is she?" Diana asked. "Shaken. Vulnerable. Perfect." Mark's voice carried a satisfaction that made both his beta wolves shift uncomfortably. The police interrogation rattled her more than she's admitting. "She's looking for a protector." "And you're happy to volunteer," Lucas said dryly. The tall blonde man had been Mark's second-in-command for over a decade, long enough to recognize the signs of an alpha's obsession reaching dangerous levels. "She's my mate," Mark replied simply. "She just doesn't know it yet." Diana and Lucas exchanged a look. They'd watched their alpha's fixation with the human actress grow from casual interest to consuming need over the past 3 years. The gifts, the surveillance, the careful manipulation of her schedule to ensure their paths would cross at the right moment, it had all led to this. "What about her family?" Diana asked. "Friends who might come looking for her?" "Handled," Mark replied. "Her parents are in Montana, her agent thinks she's taking a spiritual retreat. As far as the world knows, Jenny Martins has vanished to deal with her legal troubles in private. The police won't stop looking for her," Lucas warned. "They will when they get a better suspect," Mark said. "I've already had a word with Detective Chin. It seems they've discovered Tommy Hendricks had gambling debts with some very unsavory characters. The investigation is about to take a new direction." Both wolves nodded, understanding the implications. Mark's influence in the city ran deeper than most humans realized, extending into law enforcement, media, and the criminal underworld. When the Alpha of Manhattan wanted something handled, it got handled. "How long do you plan to keep her here?" Diana asked. Mark turned from the window, his eyes reflecting the artificial light like an animal's. "As long as it takes. She's entered my territory willingly, accepted my protection. By werewolf law, she's already mine." "She's human," Lucas pointed out carefully. "Human law doesn't recognize territorial claims." Mark's smile was sharp, predatory. "Then we'll have to make sure she chooses to stay." "Diana, I want her watched at all times. Not obviously, but I want to know her every move, every expression, every word she speaks when she thinks she's alone." "Of course, Alpha." And Lucas, begin the legal preparations. Contract marriage, ironclad prenuptial agreement, everything needed to make this arrangement permanent. Lucas's eyebrows rose. "You're moving fast, even for you." "The full moon is in 2 days," Mark replied, his voice dropping to a growl. "My control won't last much longer. She needs to understand her place in my world before then." Upstairs, Jenny stood at her window looking out at the garden, unaware that she was being watched by 3 sets of predatory eyes. The scent of pine and leather seemed stronger now, surrounding her like an invisible cage. Tomorrow, she would have to face the reality of her situation, the murder charges, the media circus, the complete destruction of the life she'd spent years building. But tonight, in this beautiful prison, she felt safer than she had in months. And that, she was beginning to realize, might be the most dangerous feeling of all. In the morning, Mark would begin the final phase of his courtship. He would offer her marriage, a business arrangement, he would claim, designed to protect her from the law and the media. A contract that would bind her to him in ways she couldn't yet understand. And Jenny, desperate and afraid and running out of options, would seriously consider accepting. The trap was closing, and the prey was walking into it willingly. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 3. Jenny woke to the sound of rain against her windows and the scent of bacon drifting from somewhere below. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot about Tommy Hendricks and police interrogations and her life crumbling around her. Then reality crashed back, and she was sitting up in the unfamiliar bed, her heart racing as she took in the elegant blue suite that had become her sanctuary. Or her prison. She was no longer sure which. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Miss Martins?" Diana's voice carried through the heavy oak door. "Mr. Bullion has requested your presence for breakfast." Requested. As if Jenny had a choice in the matter. She found Mark in a sunlit breakfast room that overlooked the private garden, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. He looked up as she entered, his smile warm and welcoming, but Jenny caught something else in his dark eyes, a predatory satisfaction that made her skin crawl. "Good morning," he said, rising to pull out her chair. "I hope you slept well." "Well enough." Jenny accepted the coffee Diana poured for her, grateful for something to do with her hands. "Thank you again for letting me stay. I should probably head home today, face whatever's waiting for me." Mark's smile faltered slightly. "I'm afraid that might not be wise. The media circus outside your building has only gotten worse overnight." He produced a tablet and slid it across the table. The headlines made Jenny's stomach drop. Jenny Martins, from America's sweetheart to cold-blooded killer. Below that, a grainy photo of her leaving the police station, her face twisted with exhaustion and fear. "It gets worse," Mark said gently. Detective Chen called in additional investigators. "They're treating this as a high-profile case now. Your apartment is under surveillance." Jenny scrolled through the articles, watching her reputation disintegrate in real time. Anonymous sources claimed she'd had previous run-ins with Tommy Hendricks. Industry insiders suggested she'd been struggling with the pressure of fame, possibly turning to drugs or alcohol. Every photo they'd chosen made her look guilty, desperate, capable of violence. This is character assassination, she whispered. It's what happens when the media smells blood in the water, Mark replied. But it's not insurmountable. I've been thinking about your situation all night, and I believe I have a solution. Jenny looked up from the tablet, hope flickering in her chest. What kind of solution? Mark leaned back in his chair, his posture casual but his eyes intense. Marry me. The words hit her like a physical blow. Excuse me? A contract marriage, Mark continued smoothly. Purely business. My legal team has already drawn up preliminary papers. As my wife, you'd be protected by spousal privilege. You couldn't be compelled to testify against me, and I couldn't be forced to testify against you. More importantly, it would change the narrative. Instead of a desperate actress fleeing justice, you become a woman who found love in her darkest hour. Jenny stared at him, certain she'd misunderstood. You're not serious. I'm completely serious. Mark's voice carried a conviction that made her shiver. Think about it, Jenny. You need protection, both legal and personal. I can provide both. In return, you give me the one thing I've always wanted, you. The honesty in his confession should have been flattering. Instead, it terrified her. Mark, we barely know each other. Some bonds transcend time, he said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. I've known you were meant for me since the first time I saw you perform. You felt it too, didn't you? The connection between us? Jenny wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. There had been something electric about their meeting in Central Park, something that made her pulse race and her skin tingle. But attraction was a far cry from marriage, even a business arrangement. This is insane, she said, pushing back from the table. I'm not marrying a stranger to escape a murder charge. Mark's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room's atmosphere. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that made Jenny's instincts scream danger. I understand your hesitation, he said carefully. But consider the alternative. Without my protection, how long do you think you'll last? The police are building a case against you. The media has already convicted you in the court of public opinion. Your career is over, Jenny. Your reputation is destroyed. What's left? I'll fight the charges, Jenny said, though her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. I'll hire the best lawyers, prove my innocence. With what money? Mark asked. Your assets are already being frozen pending the investigation. Your agent dropped you this morning, I saw the statement. Your publicist is distancing herself from the scandal. You're alone, Jenny. Completely and utterly alone. The words cut deeper than any physical blow. Jenny had built her life on the foundation of her career, her connections, her carefully cultivated image. If all of that was gone. Except you're not alone, Mark continued, rising from his chair with that fluid grace that seemed to be his trademark. I'm here. I'm offering you everything, protection, resources, a future. All you have to do is say yes. He moved closer, and Jenny caught that intoxicating scent again, pine and leather and something wild that made her head spin. When he reached out to touch her face, she didn't pull away. I won't force you, he said softly. But I need you to understand the reality of your situation. In this city, lone wolves don't survive long. They get picked off by predators, consumed by forces they can't control. But wolves who run with a pack, they thrive. The metaphor felt oddly specific, loaded with meaning Jenny couldn't quite grasp. But the message was clear: submit or face the consequences alone. How long? She asked, hating herself for even considering it. The contract can be dissolved after 2 years, Mark replied. Long enough to clear your name and rebuild your career. By then, the media will have moved on to other scandals, and you'll be free to make your own choices. 2 years. It seemed like an eternity and a heartbeat all at once. But what choice did she really have? Return to her apartment and face the media circus? Turn herself into police who'd already decided she was guilty? Trust in a legal system that favored wealth and influence, advantages Mark Bullion clearly possessed? I need time to think, Jenny said. Mark's smile was understanding, but his eyes remained predatory. Of course. But don't take too long. The full moon is tonight, and I'd prefer to have this settled before then. The comment seemed random, but something about his tone made Jenny's skin crawl. What does the moon have to do with anything? Superstition, Mark replied with a laugh that didn't quite ring true. I've always believed the full moon brings clarity to difficult decisions. He left her alone in the breakfast room, and Jenny sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. Marriage to a stranger. A contract binding her to a man she'd known for less than 24 hours. It was madness. But as the morning wore on and she caught glimpses of the news coverage through windows and whispered conversations between staff members, Jenny realized madness might be her only option. By afternoon, she'd made her decision. I'll do it, she told Mark when he found her in the library, surrounded by legal documents she'd been pretending to read. But I want my own lawyer to review the contract. Mark's smile was triumphant. Already arranged. He'll be here within the hour. The speed of his response should have been a red flag, but Jenny was too exhausted to fight anymore. She signed the papers in a daze, barely registering the complex clauses about property rights and behavior expectations. Her lawyer, a nervous man who seemed oddly deferential to Mark, assured her everything was standard for this type of arrangement. The ceremony will be tonight, Mark announced after the contracts were finalized. I've arranged for a minister and witnesses. Nothing elaborate, just a simple exchange of vows. Tonight? Jenny's pulse quickened. That seems awfully fast. Why wait? Mark asked. The sooner we're married, the sooner we can begin controlling the narrative. Diana has already prepared appropriate attire for you. Diana appeared as if summoned, carrying a garment bag that contained the most beautiful wedding dress Jenny had ever seen. It was vintage-inspired, with intricate beadwork and flowing silk that seemed to shimmer in the lamplight. When Jenny held it up to herself, it fit perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for her. How did you know my size? She asked. Lucky guess, Mark replied, but his smile held secrets. As evening approached, Jenny found herself being prepared for a wedding she'd never wanted to a man she barely knew. Diana worked with professional efficiency, styling Jenny's hair into an elegant updo and applying makeup that enhanced her natural beauty without looking overdone. You're very beautiful, Diana said as she fastened a delicate pearl necklace around Jenny's throat. The alpha will be pleased. The what? Jenny caught Diana's eyes in the mirror. Mr. Bullion, Diana corrected quickly. I meant Mr. Bullion will be pleased. Sometimes the staff, we have nicknames for him. He has such a commanding presence. But Jenny had heard what she'd heard, and the word alpha sent chills down her spine. The ceremony took place in Mark's private garden as the full moon rose over Manhattan. Hurricane lamps provided flickering light, and someone had scattered white rose petals along a makeshift aisle. It should have been romantic, but something about the setting felt primitive, ancient, wrong. The witnesses were unlike anyone Jenny had ever met. Elder Mortimer Grimm was a man in his 70s with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through her. Luna Vera Shadowmere appeared to be in her 50s, with prematurely white hair and an unsettling smile that never quite reached her eyes. Welcome to the pack, Luna Vera whispered as she embraced Jenny before the ceremony began. Pack. There was that word again, loaded with implications Jenny didn't want to explore. The minister was a tall, gaunt man who spoke in a language Jenny didn't recognize before switching to English for the familiar wedding vows. But even the English portions felt strange, archaic, filled with references to bonds that could never be broken and territories that would be shared. When Mark slipped the ring onto her finger, Jenny felt something electric pass between them, not attraction, but something deeper, more fundamental. For a moment, the world seemed to shift around her, and she could have sworn she smelled pine forests and heard the distant howl of wind through ancient trees. You may kiss your bride, the minister intoned. Mark's kiss was possessive, claiming, and Jenny felt something inside her respond despite her fear. When they broke apart, his eyes seemed to glow in the moonlight, and she caught a glimpse of something inhuman in their depths. Mine, he whispered against her lips, so quietly only she could hear. The reception was brief, champagne and cake served in the garden while the full moon reached its zenith overhead. Jenny smiled and nodded as the small group of guests offered their congratulations, but she felt disconnected from her own body, as if she were watching someone else's wedding from a great distance. It wasn't until they were alone in Mark's master suite that the full reality of her situation hit her. "You can have the bed," she said quickly, backing toward the sitting area. "I'll take the couch." Mark's laugh was low, predatory. "I don't think you understand, Jenny. We're married now. Truly married, by laws older than any human court." He began unbuttoning his shirt, and Jenny caught sight of something that made her breath catch: intricate tattoos that covered his chest and arms, symbols that looked tribal, ancient, almost like claw marks. "What are those?" she whispered. "Pack markings," Mark replied casually. "Family tradition. You'll receive yours in time." "I don't want any tattoos," Jenny said, her voice rising with panic. Mark's expression shifted, the civilized mask slipping away to reveal something wild and dangerous underneath. "What you want stopped being relevant the moment you entered my territory, accepted my protection, spoke those vows. You're mine now, Jenny. My mate, my property, bound to me by bonds you can't even comprehend." He stalked toward her, and Jenny saw something impossible. His eyes were definitely glowing now, reflecting the moonlight like an animal's. His movements had become more fluid, predatory, inhuman. "You're scaring me," she whispered. "Good," Mark growled, his voice deeper than it had been moments before. "Fear will help you understand your place. You wanted protection, Jenny. You wanted someone to shield you from the world. Congratulations. You've just bound yourself to the most dangerous predator in New York City." The transformation was complete now. Gone was the sophisticated businessman who'd offered her sanctuary. In his place stood something barely contained by human skin, something that looked at her with the hunger of a predator for its prey. "The territorial madness," he continued, circling her like a wolf sizing up its victim. "Do you know what that means? It means every instinct I possess is screaming at me to claim what's mine, to mark my territory, to ensure no other male ever looks at you again." Jenny pressed her back against the wall, trapped in the corner of the room. "Mark, please." "Alpha," he corrected sharply. "You'll address me as Alpha from now on. And you'll learn to submit, Jenny. One way or another, you'll learn your place in my pack." The moonlight streaming through the windows seemed to make him grow larger, more imposing, less human with each passing moment. And Jenny realized with crystal clarity that she hadn't been rescued at all. She'd been captured. The contract marriage she'd signed wasn't a business arrangement, it was a trap, carefully constructed by a predator who'd been stalking her for years. And now, under the light of the full moon, Mark Bullion was finally ready to claim his prize. "Welcome to your new life, mate," he said, his smile revealing teeth that seemed sharper than they should be. "I hope you're ready for what comes next." Chapter 4. Jenny woke to the sound of a lock turning, not the soft click of a bedroom door, but the heavy, mechanical grinding of reinforced steel. Her eyes flew open, and for a disorienting moment, she couldn't understand where she was. The room was smaller than the blue suite, windowless, with stone walls that reminded her of a medieval dungeon more than a Manhattan mansion. Memory crashed back like a physical blow. The wedding ceremony under the full moon. Mark's transformation from sophisticated businessman to predatory monster. His final words echoing in her mind, "Welcome to your new life, mate." She sat up on the narrow bed, her wedding dress wrinkled and torn at the hem where she'd tried to run. The beautiful silk now felt like a costume from a nightmare she couldn't wake from. "Good, you're awake." Mark's voice came from the doorway, and Jenny's blood turned to ice. He looked different in the harsh fluorescent light, larger somehow, more imposing. His dark hair was disheveled, and when he smiled, she could swear his canine teeth looked sharper than they should. But it was his eyes that terrified her most. They held a predatory gleam that made every instinct scream at her to run. "Where am I?" Jenny's voice came out as a whisper. "The basement level of my home," Mark replied, stepping into the room and closing the reinforced door behind him. specially designed for difficult transitions. The walls are soundproofed, the door is steel reinforced, and there's no cell phone reception. No one can hear you, and no one can find you. Jenny scrambled to the far corner of the bed, pressing her back against the cold stone wall. You can't keep me here. This is kidnapping. When people realize I'm missing. No one is looking for you, Mark interrupted, his voice carrying cruel amusement. Remember? You're a murder suspect who fled justice. As far as the world knows, you're in hiding somewhere, afraid to face the consequences of your actions. He pulled a tablet from his jacket and showed her the screen. News articles scrolled past, stories about her disappearance, speculation about her guilt, expert commentary on her psychological state. Every headline painted her as a fugitive, a killer on the run. The beauty of it, Mark continued, is that I saved all these articles before I arranged Tommy's death. I knew exactly how the narrative would play out. The casual confession hit Jenny like a physical blow. You killed Tommy? Mark's smile was cold, predatory. Of course I did. The little parasite was threatening my mate. Did you really think I'd allow that to continue? Jenny stared at him in horror, finally understanding the full scope of her situation. The note, the one about wolves and alpha justice. A nice touch, don't you think? I wanted to make it clear to any other supernatural predators in the city that you were under my protection. Unfortunately, the human police interpreted it as gang activity, which worked perfectly for my purposes. He moved closer to the bed, and Jenny caught that intoxicating scent again, pine and leather and wild things. But now, instead of making her pulse race with attraction, it made her stomach turn with revulsion. You've been planning this, she whispered. For how long? 3 years, Mark replied matter-of-factly. Ever since I first saw you perform in that little off-Broadway theater. You were playing Lady Macbeth, and the way you delivered the sleepwalking scene. I knew then that you belonged to me. The memory made Jenny's skin crawl. She remembered that performance, how she'd felt watched throughout the entire run. She'd attributed it to stage nerves, never imagining that something truly predatory had been stalking her from the shadows. The gifts, she said, pieces falling into place. The roses, the chocolates, the book. All part of my courtship, Mark confirmed. I wanted you to know you had an admirer, someone who understood your worth. I had hoped you'd be more receptive to my advances when I finally revealed myself. Courtship? Jenny's voice rose with hysteria. You call stalking and murder courtship? Mark's expression darkened, and for a moment, Jenny saw something inhuman flicker across his features. You'll learn to watch your tone when speaking to me. I am an alpha, and you are my mate. That relationship comes with certain expectations. He sat on the edge of the bed, and Jenny tried to press herself further into the corner, but there was nowhere to go. When he reached out to touch her face, she flinched away. Don't, she whispered. Mark's hand froze, then curled into a fist. Don't what? Don't touch what belongs to me. Don't claim what I've spent years hunting. His voice was changing, deepening, becoming less human with each word. Do you have any idea what it's been like, Jenny? Watching you from afar, knowing you were mine but unable to claim you? The territorial madness that comes with an unmated alpha's obsession? He stood abruptly, beginning to pace the small room like a caged animal. Every man who looked at you, every co-star who touched you during love scenes, every photographer who captured your image, my instinct screamed at me to eliminate them all. Do you know how much control it took to wait, to plan, to do this properly? Jenny watched him pace, noting the predatory grace of his movements, the way his hands flexed as if fighting the urge to transform into claws. You're insane. Mark stopped pacing and turned to look at her, his eyes definitely glowing now in the fluorescent light. Insane? No, Jenny. I'm a predator who's finally claimed his prey. There's nothing insane about following one's nature. He moved to a chair in the corner, the only other furniture in the room, and settled into it with fluid grace. Let me tell you about nature, my dear wife. Let me tell you about what it means to be claimed by an alpha werewolf. The word hung in the air between them like a bridge Jenny hadn't wanted to cross. Werewolf. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach drop. You're... She started, but couldn't finish the sentence. A monster? Mark supplied helpfully. A creature from fairy tales and horror movies? Yes, I suppose I am. But I'm also the most powerful predator in this city, and you've just become my mate. He leaned forward, his intense gaze never leaving her face. The mating bond we sealed last night isn't just a human legal contract, Jenny. It's an ancient supernatural binding that ties your life to mine. In the eyes of pack law, you belong to me completely. Jenny shook her head, refusing to accept what she was hearing. This is impossible. Werewolves aren't real. Mark's laugh was low and menacing. Would you like a demonstration? Before Jenny could respond, Mark began to change. His features shifted subtly, his jaw extending, his teeth sharpening, his eyes taking on an amber glow that was definitely not human. Coarse hair sprouted along his forearms, and when he flexed his hands, she could see claws extending from his fingertips. The transformation was partial, controlled, but terrifying enough to make Jenny press herself against the wall so hard she thought she might push through the stone. This is just a taste, Mark said, his voice now a growl that rumbled through the small room. Under the full moon, the change is complete. I become something that could tear you apart without effort. He allowed his features to return to human normal, but the predatory gleam in his eyes remained. Now do you understand the reality of your situation? Jenny couldn't speak, couldn't think beyond the primitive terror flooding her system. Everything she thought she knew about the world had just been shattered. You're not my first mate, Mark continued conversationally, as if he hadn't just revealed himself to be a literal monster. There were 3 others before you. Isabella Nightshade, Rosalie Moonfeather, and Catherine Silverpaw. The names sounded exotic, otherworldly. Where are they now? Jenny managed to whisper. Mark's smile was cold. Dead. All 3 of them are dead. The casual way he said it made Jenny's blood freeze. You killed them? They left me no choice, Mark replied with a shrug. Isabella tried to escape back to her pack in Montana. Rosalie attempted to break the mating bond through some ridiculous ritual magic. Catherine actually made it as far as the Canadian border before I caught her. He stood and walked to a section of wall that looked different from the rest, newer, more recently constructed. Their bodies are in the attic. Preserved, of course. I'm not a savage. Jenny's stomach lurched. You keep trophies? I keep reminders, Mark corrected. Reminders of what happens when mates forget their place, when they attempt to leave their alpha. It's a lesson I hope you won't need to learn firsthand. The threat was clear, and Jenny felt what remained of her hope crumble. She wasn't just trapped, she was trapped with a predator who had killed before and would kill again. The difference is, Mark continued, returning to his chair, Isabella, Rosalie, and Catherine were all werewolves. They had supernatural strength, enhanced senses, pack connections that might have helped them escape. You're just human, Jenny. Fragile, vulnerable, completely dependent on my protection. He leaned back, studying her with the detached interest of a scientist examining a specimen. It makes you both more precious and more expendable. I could break your neck with one hand, but I could also keep you safe from every other predator in this city. Your survival depends entirely on your willingness to submit. Jenny closed her eyes, trying to process the nightmare her life had become. 3 days ago, she'd been America's beloved actress, worried about nothing more serious than her next role. Now she was trapped in a basement dungeon by a werewolf who collected dead mates like trophies. Why me? She whispered. Because you're perfect, Mark replied simply. Beautiful, talented, strong enough to be interesting but human enough to be controlled. And because the moment I saw you, every instinct told me you were mine. He stood again, moving toward the door. I'll bring you food later. In the meantime, I suggest you think about your situation. You have 2 choices, Jenny, submit willingly and live comfortably as my mate, or fight me and join Isabella, Rosalie, and Catherine in the attic. He paused at the door, looking back at her with those predatory eyes. I do hope you choose wisely. I'd hate to add a fourth trophy to my collection so soon after our wedding. The heavy door closed behind him with a finality that echoed through Jenny's bones. She heard the lock engage, the mechanical grinding that sealed her fate, and then silence. She was alone in her stone prison with the knowledge that she'd married a monster who had killed 3 women before her. A creature who kept their bodies as warnings, who saw murder as a natural consequence of disobedience. But as the shock began to wear off, Jenny felt something else stirring beneath her terror: rage. Mark had stalked her, manipulated her, trapped her, and now he expected her to submit like a broken animal. He might be a supernatural predator, but she was Jenny Martins. She'd built a career on becoming other people, on finding strength in impossible situations, on transforming herself into whatever a role required. And right now, the role required her to become a survivor. She just had to figure out how to survive a monster who had already proven he was willing to kill to keep his mates in line. A monster who kept their bodies as trophies to remind future victims of the price of resistance. In the darkness of her stone prison, Jenny began to plan. Chapter 5. 3 days had passed since Mark's revelation, 3 days of meals pushed through a slot in the door and silence broken only by the distant sounds of the mansion above. Jenny had explored every inch of her stone prison, searching for weaknesses, escape routes, anything that might give her hope. She'd found nothing but solid walls and the growing certainty that Mark had designed this room to be inescapable. She was sitting on the narrow bed, staring at the reinforced door, when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Not Mark's confident stride, but something lighter, more hesitant. The lock turned with its familiar grinding sound, and the door opened to reveal a stranger. The man in the doorway was younger than Mark, perhaps in his late 20s, with sandy brown hair and kind eyes the color of warm honey. He was tall and lean, dressed casually in jeans and a simple button-down shirt that emphasized his athletic build. But it was his expression that caught Jenny's attention, a mixture of curiosity and growing horror as he took in her surroundings. Jesus Christ, Mark, the stranger muttered under his breath, then seemed to remember Jenny was there. I'm sorry, I'm Benny. Benny Bullion. Mark's cousin. Jenny pressed herself against the wall, uncertain whether this new arrival meant salvation or fresh danger. Are you here too? She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice her fears about what Mark might have planned. No, Benny said quickly, his voice gentle but firm. I'm not here to hurt you. Mark asked me to meet his new wife. I had no idea. He gestured at the stone walls, the reinforced door, the prison-like conditions. This isn't what he told me. Something in his tone made Jenny believe him. Where Mark's presence felt predatory and dangerous, Benny radiated a calm strength that made her want to trust him. But she'd been fooled before. What did he tell you? She asked carefully. Benny ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. He said he'd found his mate, that she was adjusting to pack life. He wanted me to meet her, to welcome her to the family. He looked around the room again, his jaw tightening. He didn't mention locking her in a basement. Pack life? Jenny seized on the phrase. You're one of them? She couldn't bring herself to say the word. A werewolf, Benny confirmed quietly. But not like Mark. We may share blood, but we don't share his methods. He stepped fully into the room, and Jenny caught a scent that was similar to Mark's but warmer somehow, pine and leather, but also something clean and comforting that reminded her of summer rain. Unlike Mark's overwhelming presence, Benny's scent made her feel calmer rather than trapped. How long have you been down here? He asked. 3 days. Since the wedding. Jenny watched his face carefully, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. He told me about the others. Isabella, Rosalie, Catherine. He said he killed them when they tried to escape. Benny's expression darkened. I was afraid of that. They'd been missing for months, and Mark claimed they'd returned to their home packs. But I suspected. He trailed off, then met her eyes directly. I'm sorry. I should have questioned his story more thoroughly. You knew them? Isabella was my friend, Benny said quietly. We grew up together in the pack. She was kind, gentle, nothing like the rebellious mate Mark described. When she disappeared, I wanted to investigate, but Mark forbade it. Said it would interfere with pack dynamics. Jenny felt a chill of recognition. He keeps their bodies in the attic. As trophies. Benny's face went pale, and for a moment, something dangerous flickered in his honey-colored eyes. That sick bastard, he whispered. Isabella deserved better than that. They all did. Are you going to help me? Jenny asked, hope and desperation warring in her voice. Benny was quiet for a long moment, staring at the stone floor. When he looked up, his expression was resolute. Yes. But it won't be easy. Mark is the alpha of this territory. Challenging him directly would mean death for both of us. Then what do you suggest? I need time to think, to plan. Mark is leaving tomorrow for a business trip to Chicago, expanding his territory, he says. He'll be gone for a week. That gives us time to figure out an escape route. Jenny's heart leaped. A week without Mark's oppressive presence, a week to plan and prepare. Will you be able to visit me while he's gone? I'll find a way, Benny promised. Diana and Lucas follow Mark's orders, but they're not cruel. I can convince them to let me check on you, bring you books or other comforts. As if summoned by his name, Lucas appeared in the doorway. The tall blonde man looked uncomfortable, his usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious unease. Alpha wants to see you both upstairs, he announced. Now. Benny nodded, then turned back to Jenny. It's going to be all right, he said quietly. I won't let him hurt you. The promise shouldn't have meant anything. She barely knew him, had no reason to trust another member of Mark's pack. But something in Benny's eyes, some fundamental decency that Mark completely lacked, made her believe him. They were escorted to Mark's study, where the alpha sat behind his massive desk like a king holding court. He looked up as they entered, his predatory smile widening as he took in Jenny's appearance. Ah, my beautiful wife, he said, rising to circle the desk. I hope you've been thinking about our conversation. Jenny said nothing, but Mark seemed to take her silence as submission. He turned to Benny, his expression smug and triumphant. Well, cousin? What do you think of my mate? Benny's jaw was tight, but his voice remained carefully neutral. She's very beautiful, Mark. You're fortunate. Fortunate? Mark laughed, the sound cold and predatory. Fortune had nothing to do with it. I hunted her for 3 years, planned every detail of her capture. She's the perfect mate, famous enough to be a worthy trophy, but human enough to be controllable. Jenny watched Benny's face, saw the disgust he was trying to hide. Mark, drunk on his own success, seemed oblivious to his cousin's reaction. She'll learn her place soon enough, Mark continued. They always do, eventually. The basement room is quite effective for adjustment periods. The basement room? Benny's voice was carefully controlled. Where I keep new mates until they accept their situation, Mark explained casually. Isabella lasted 2 weeks before she submitted. Rosalie only needed a few days. Catherine. He paused, his expression darkening. Catherine never learned. But Jenny's smarter than that, aren't you, darling? Jenny met his gaze steadily, refusing to show fear. I'm learning a lot about you, Mark. More than you probably want me to know. Mark's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. Defiance is natural at first. You'll grow out of it. He moved to pour himself a drink from the bar cart, his movements loose and confident. I'll be traveling to Chicago tomorrow, expanding the pack's business interests. While I'm gone, I expect you to think carefully about your choices, Jenny. When I return, I'll want to see progress in your attitude. The threat was clear, and Jenny felt her stomach clench with fear. But she also felt something else, a flicker of hope. Mark would be gone for a week. 7 days to plan, to prepare, to find a way out of this nightmare. Benny will check on you while I'm away, Mark continued. Make sure you have everything you need. Won't you, cousin? Of course, Benny replied, his voice steady despite the tension Jenny could see in his shoulders. Mark finished his drink and set the glass down with a satisfied smile. Excellent. Now, I think it's time for my lovely wife to return to her room. We have an early morning tomorrow. The dismissal was clear, and Lucas stepped forward to escort Jenny back to her prison. But as they reached the door, Mark's voice stopped them. Oh, and Jenny? Sweet dreams. Try not to think too much about Isabella, Rosalie, and Catherine. I'd hate for you to have nightmares about joining them. The casual cruelty in his voice made Jenny's blood run cold, but she forced herself to walk steadily from the room. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. Back in her stone prison, Jenny sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. Benny's arrival had changed the dynamic completely. Unlike Diana and Lucas, who followed Mark's orders without question, Benny seemed genuinely troubled by her situation. But could she trust him? He was Mark's cousin, a member of the same pack. For all she knew, this could be another manipulation, another way for Mark to break down her resistance. Yet something about Benny felt different. His scent, his manner, the way he'd looked at her, not with Mark's possessive hunger, but with something that felt almost like recognition. The next morning, Jenny heard the sounds of departure, cars starting, doors slamming, Mark's voice giving final instructions to his staff. Then silence settled over the mansion like a heavy blanket. She waited, counting the hours by the meals delivered through her door slot. It wasn't until evening that she heard familiar footsteps in the corridor. The lock turned, and Benny appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray of food that smelled infinitely better than the simple meals she'd been receiving. I thought you might be hungry, he said, setting the tray on the small table in the corner. Diana's not much of a cook, but I managed to convince her to let me bring you something decent. Jenny approached the tray cautiously. The food was simple but well prepared: roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, bread that was still warm from the oven. It was the first real meal she'd had since her imprisonment began. Thank you, she said, surprised by how much the gesture meant to her. Benny settled into the chair, watching her eat. Mark's gone, he said quietly. His plane left an hour ago. We have a week. A week to do what, exactly? Jenny asked between bites. To get you out of here. To somewhere safe. Benny leaned forward, his expression intense. But first, I need to explain some things about our world. About what Mark is, what I am, and what's really happening here. Jenny set down her fork, giving him her full attention. I'm listening. Werewolves live in packs, Benny began. There are hierarchies, alphas who lead, betas who support them, omegas who maintain pack harmony. Mark is an alpha, but he's broken. His territorial instincts have become twisted into something monstrous. And you're a beta? Yes. I'm supposed to support my alpha, follow his lead, help maintain pack stability. But what Mark is doing? Benny shook his head. This isn't pack behavior. This is the behavior of a rogue wolf, someone who's lost touch with everything that makes us civilized. Jenny studied his face, looking for signs of deception. Why are you telling me this? Why are you helping me? Benny was quiet for a long moment, his honey-colored eyes troubled. Because there's something Mark doesn't understand, something his madness has blinded him to. What? The mating bond, Benny said quietly. True werewolf mates are determined by scent, by an instinctive recognition that goes beyond conscious choice. Mark forced a bond with you through ritual and dominance, but it's not real. Jenny's pulse quickened. What do you mean? Benny met her eyes, and Jenny saw something vulnerable in his expression. I mean your scent, it calls to me. Not to Mark. The real mating bond, the one that nature intended, it's not between you and him. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Jenny's head spin. You're saying... I'm saying Mark kidnapped and married another werewolf's true mate, Benny said softly. Mine. The revelation should have terrified her, another werewolf claiming her as his mate, another supernatural bond she didn't understand. But instead of fear, Jenny felt something else, a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. The way Benny's scent calmed her instead of overwhelming her. The immediate trust she'd felt despite every reason to be suspicious. The recognition in his eyes when he'd first seen her. "That's impossible," she whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't. "Is it?" Benny asked gently. "How do you feel when you're near me, Jenny? Compared to how you feel with Mark?" Jenny couldn't deny the difference. With Mark, she felt trapped, hunted, like prey in the presence of a predator. With Benny, she felt safe. Protected. Like she could breathe for the first time since this nightmare began. "Even if that's true," she said carefully, "I'm human. I can't be anyone's mate." "The supernatural world is more complex than most humans realize," Benny replied. "There are human werewolf matings, though they're rare. The bond transcends species when it's real." He stood, moving to the small window that looked out onto the garden. "I've been fighting this recognition since the moment I walked into this room. Pack loyalty should come first, should override personal feelings. But I can't stand by and watch Mark destroy another innocent woman." Jenny joined him at the window, standing close enough to catch his calming scent. "What happens if we run? What happens to pack hierarchy?" "I become a rogue," Benny said simply. "Cut off from pack support, hunted by Mark and his followers. It's not a decision I make lightly." "Then why make it at all?" Benny turned to look at her, his honey-colored eyes serious. "Because some things are more important than pack loyalty. Because Isabella, Rosalie, and Catherine deserved someone to fight for them, and they didn't get it. Because you deserve a choice in your own life." He reached out, his fingers barely brushing her cheek. "And because I've been looking for you my whole life, even when I didn't know what I was looking for." Jenny closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like she could trust someone completely. Not because she had to, not because she was trapped and desperate, but because everything in her recognized him as safe. "What do we do?" she asked. "We plan," Benny said, his voice gaining strength and determination. "We find a way to get you out of here before Mark returns. And then we disappear, start over somewhere he can't find us." "Is that possible?" "It won't be easy," Benny admitted. "Mark has resources, connections, other pack members who'll hunt us. But I know places we can go, people who'll help us. It's possible." Jenny opened her eyes, meeting his steady gaze. "Then let's do it." The decision felt right, felt inevitable. She'd married one werewolf under false pretenses, been claimed by a monster who collected dead mates like trophies. But this felt like choice. Like hope. Like the beginning of something real, instead of the end of everything she'd ever been. "We'll start tomorrow," Benny promised. "I'll bring maps, supplies, everything we'll need. By the time Mark returns, we'll be gone." As he prepared to leave, Jenny caught his hand. "Benny? What if he catches us?" Benny's expression grew serious. "Then we fight. Together. And whatever happens, you won't face it alone." The promise settled into her bones like a vow, like the beginning of a bond that had nothing to do with supernatural compulsion and everything to do with choice, trust, and the kind of love that was worth risking everything to protect. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 6. The new moon hung invisible in the star-scattered sky, a dark blessing that Jenny had learned to appreciate in ways she never would have imagined a week ago. Benny had explained it carefully. During the new moon, an alpha's supernatural strength waned to its weakest point. It was their best chance, perhaps their only chance. Jenny pressed herself against the cold stone wall of her prison, listening to the sounds of the mansion settling into its midnight quiet. 6 days had passed since Mark's departure. 6 days of careful planning, of maps drawn on scraps of paper and quickly hidden, of supplies smuggled in with meals and conversations that sounded casual but carried the weight of life and death. The lock turned with its familiar grinding sound, but this time it meant freedom instead of another visit. Benny slipped inside, his movements fluid and silent in the darkness. He was dressed entirely in black, jeans, sweater, boots that would make no sound on forest floors. His honey-colored eyes found hers immediately, and she saw the same mixture of determination and fear that had been building in her own chest. "Are you ready?" he whispered. Jenny nodded, pulling on the dark jacket he'd brought her 2 days ago. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but beneath the terror was something she hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Real, tangible hope that this nightmare might actually end. Benny handed her a small backpack. Water, energy bars, first aid kit. There's also a change of clothes and some cash. He paused, meeting her eyes in the dim light. "Once we leave this room, there's no going back. Mark will never forgive this betrayal, and he'll hunt us both to the ends of the earth." "I know," Jenny said quietly. "I'd rather die free than live as his prisoner." Something fierce and protective flashed in Benny's expression. "You won't die. I won't let that happen." The promise settled into her bones like a vow, just as it had every night this week when he'd visited her. Each conversation had deepened the connection between them, the sense that they were two halves of something larger, something that Mark's forced bond could never touch. Benny moved to the door, listening intently for several long moments. "Diana and Lucas are both asleep. I slipped something into their evening wine, nothing harmful, just a mild sedative that will keep them down for a few hours. By the time they wake up, we'll be long gone." Jenny felt a pang of guilt. Will they be in trouble when Mark returns? They'll claim they never heard anything, that we must have left during their patrol rounds. Mark will suspect, but he won't be able to prove negligence. Benny's jaw tightened. Besides, they've enabled his cruelty for too long. A little inconvenience is the least they deserve. They moved through the mansion's corridors like ghosts, Benny's supernatural senses guiding them past sleeping staff and around the security systems he knew by heart. Jenny marveled at how different the house felt in darkness, less like a prison and more like the tomb it truly was, filled with the ghosts of Isabella, Rosalie, and Catherine. The night air hit her face like a benediction when they finally stepped outside. After a week in that stone room, even the simple act of breathing freely felt like a miracle. Benny caught her hand, his touch warm and steadying. "Stay close," he murmured. "We're heading for the North Woods. There are old deer paths that don't show up on any of Mark's patrol routes." They moved across the manicured grounds toward the tree line, their footsteps silent on the dew-dampened grass. Jenny's human eyes struggled in the darkness, but Benny guided her with the confidence of someone who could see perfectly in the moonless night. The forest embraced them with the scent of pine and rich earth. Jenny had always loved hiking. It was one of the few activities that had kept her grounded during her years of fame, but she'd never moved through woods like this, following paths that seemed invisible until Benny showed her exactly where to step. "These trails were made by deer generations ago," he explained quietly as they wound deeper into the wilderness. "Pack wolves use the main roads and marked territories, but these paths exist in the spaces between. Neutral ground that belongs to no one and everyone." They walked for what felt like hours, though Jenny suspected Benny was moderating his pace for her human limitations. Her legs ached and her lungs burned, but she pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that every step took her further from Mark's influence. "How much further?" she whispered when they paused beside a small stream. Benny checked his watch, his expression thoughtful. "We're making good time. Another hour should bring us to the border of Midnight Ridge territory. That's where we'll meet Alpha Donovan." Jenny knelt beside the stream, cupping the cold water in her hands to drink. "Tell me about him again. About this Alpha who's willing to challenge Mark." "Donovan Stormclaw has led the Midnight Ridge pack for 15 years, Benny said, settling beside her on a fallen log. "He's everything Mark isn't, honorable, just, protective of the innocent. His territory borders Mark's, and there's been tension between them for years over Mark's methods." "Has he dealt with situations like this before?" "Not exactly like this," Benny admitted. "Forced matings are rare, and most disputes are handled within pack structures. But pack law allows for challenges when there's evidence of abuse, especially involving non-werewolf victims. Donovan has the authority to investigate Mark's claim and potentially nullify the forced bond. Jenny absorbed this information, trying not to think too hard about the implications. The supernatural world operated by rules she was only beginning to understand, and her life now depended on navigating them correctly. What about the others? Samantha and Theodore? Beta Samantha Firebraze is Donovan's second-in-command. She's fierce, brilliant, and completely intolerant of bullies. If anyone can build a legal case against Mark, it's her. Benny's expression grew warmer. Theodore Nightwing is their Gamma, third in the hierarchy, but specializing in pack justice and law. He's already agreed to serve as our advocate. The sound of their names felt like a lifeline. Real people who were willing to help, to stand against Mark's cruelty. Jenny hadn't realized how desperately she needed to believe that such people existed. They resumed walking, following the stream as it meandered through increasingly dense forest. Jenny lost herself in the rhythm of footsteps and flowing water, in the gradual lightening of the sky that promised dawn wasn't far away. It was Benny who stopped first, his entire body going rigid with sudden tension. "What is it?" Jenny whispered, though something in his expression made her heart sink. Benny's nostrils flared, testing the air. His honey-colored eyes had gone gold with alarm. "Mark. His scent is fresh, and getting stronger." Jenny felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible. He's in Chicago. His plane." He turned around, Benny said grimly. "Something alerted him to your absence. Probably the bond he forced on you. It would have weakened with distance, making him aware that something was wrong." The forest around them suddenly felt less like sanctuary and more like a trap. Every shadow could hide a predator, every sound could herald their destruction. "How far are we from Midnight Ridge territory?" Jenny asked, fighting to keep panic from her voice. 20 minutes at human pace, Benny replied, already pulling her forward along the stream bank. "But Mark moves faster than any human, faster than most werewolves. We won't make it." They ran then, abandoning stealth for speed. Jenny pushed her body beyond its limits, driven by terror and the knowledge that capture meant death, not just for her, but for the man who'd risked everything to save her. The forest blurred around them as they crashed through underbrush and leaped over fallen logs. Jenny's lungs burned and her legs trembled, but Benny's hand in hers kept her moving forward. Behind them, she began to hear it, the sound of pursuit. Not quite human footsteps, but something larger, more powerful, moving through the forest with supernatural speed and grace. "There," Benny gasped, pointing ahead to where the trees began to thin. "The clearing. That's neutral territory, the border between pack lands." They burst from the tree line into a wide meadow dotted with wildflowers, beautiful in the growing dawn light. But beauty was the last thing on Jenny's mind as she heard the sounds of pursuit growing closer. "Benny," she panted, stumbling to a halt in the center of the clearing. "I can't run anymore." He turned back to her, his face a mask of grim determination. "You don't have to. We make our stand here." The words had barely left his lips when Mark emerged from the forest behind them. Jenny had never seen the alpha like this, hair wild, clothes torn from his frantic journey, eyes blazing with supernatural fury. He moved like a predator, every step deliberate and threatening, his powerful frame radiating barely controlled violence. "Did you really think you could steal my mate and escape unpunished?" Mark's voice carried across the clearing, cold and deadly. Benny stepped protectively in front of Jenny, his own posture shifting into something more aggressive. "She was never your mate, Mark. The bond you forced is artificial, built on violence and coercion." Mark laughed, the sound sending chills down Jenny's spine. "The bond is sealed and witnessed. She belongs to me." "Not anymore," came a new voice from the opposite edge of the clearing. Jenny's heart leaped as three figures emerged from the forest. A tall man with silver-streaked dark hair who could only be Alpha Donovan, a fierce-looking woman with flame-red hair who must be Beta Samantha, and a lean man with prematurely white hair that marked him as Gamma Theodore. Mark's expression shifted from triumph to wariness as he assessed the new arrivals. "Donovan. This is pack business, not your concern." Abuse of non-werewolf civilians is everyone's concern, Donovan replied calmly, his authority filling the clearing like a tangible force. As is the forced claiming of another wolf's true mate. Lies, Mark snarled, but Jenny caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Samantha stepped forward, her green eyes blazing. We have testimony from pack members about your previous mates, Mark. Isabella, Rosalie, and Catherine didn't return to their home packs. They're dead, aren't they? Mark's mask of civilization finally cracked completely. With a roar of rage, he began to change, his human form blurring and expanding as bones cracked and reformed. But before the transformation could complete, Benny launched himself forward. The two werewolves collided in a tangle of claws and fury, rolling across the meadow grass in a deadly dance. Jenny scrambled backward, her heart in her throat as she watched Benny, sweet, gentle Benny, fight with savage determination against his alpha. Stop. Donovan's voice cracked like a whip across the clearing. This is neutral territory. Pack law applies here. Both combatants froze, breathing hard, Mark's partial transformation leaving him looking monstrous in the morning light. Beta Benny Bullion, Donovan continued formally, you stand accused of stealing your alpha's mate and breaking pack law. How do you answer? Benny straightened, meeting Donovan's gaze directly. I answer that Alpha Mark Bullion has perverted pack law through forced matings, murder, and abuse. I claim sanctuary for myself and my true mate under the ancient laws of protection. Your true mate? Donovan's eyebrows rose. Jenny Martins is my mate by blood and scent recognition, Benny declared. The bond Mark forced through ritual and coercion is false. I can prove it. Mark's laughter was bitter and mocking. Prove it? She's human, Benny. Humans can't be true mates to werewolves. Can't they? Theodore stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of pack law. Ancient precedent suggests otherwise. The mating bond transcends species when it's genuine. Jenny watched this supernatural court proceed with a mixture of hope and terror. Her fate was being decided by laws she didn't understand, by creatures whose world she'd been thrust into against her will. But when Benny turned to look at her, his honey-colored eyes full of love and desperate hope, she knew what she had to do. I can settle this, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the meadow. All eyes turned to her, and Jenny felt the weight of their attention like a physical force. But she'd spent years on stage, years learning to project confidence even when her heart was breaking. She could do this. Mark's bond feels like chains, she said clearly. Like being hunted, trapped, suffocated. But with Benny. She met his eyes, letting her feelings show. With Benny, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in my life. The silence that followed her words was profound, broken only by the sound of birds beginning their morning songs. It was Donovan who spoke first. The woman has spoken her truth. By ancient law, forced bonds can be dissolved when freely rejected in favor of true recognition. Mark's roar of rage shattered the morning quiet, but before he could move, Samantha and Theodore flanked him, their own supernatural strength keeping him contained. Alpha Mark Bullion, Donovan continued, his voice carrying the weight of judgment, you will submit to investigation for the murders of Isabella Nightshade, Rosalie Moonfeather, and Catherine Silverpaw. You will cease all contact with Jenny Martins, and you will accept the dissolution of your forced claim. Never, Mark snarled, his eyes fixed on Jenny with obsessive hunger. She's mine. I'll hunt her to the ends of the earth before I let another wolf have her. The threat hung in the air like a promise of violence, and Jenny knew their battle was far from over. But for the first time since this nightmare began, she wasn't facing it alone. Benny moved to her side, his hand finding hers with perfect naturalness. The touch sent warmth through her entire body, a sense of rightness that no forced bond could ever replicate. Then you'll have to go through me, Benny said quietly, his voice carrying steel beneath the gentleness. Mark's smile was cold and predatory. That can be arranged. The sun crested the horizon, painting the meadow in gold and crimson, and Jenny realized their real fight was just beginning. Chapter 7. The abandoned warehouse squatted like a wounded beast on the outskirts of the industrial district, its broken windows staring blindly into the gray morning. Jenny pressed herself against Benny's side as they moved through the shadows between rusted machinery and forgotten shipping containers, their footsteps echoing hollowly in the cavernous space. 3 hours had passed since the confrontation in the meadow. 3 hours of running through back alleys and forgotten paths while Donovan and his pack tried to contain Mark's fury. But territorial madness was a terrible thing in an alpha, and Mark had broken free with the single-minded determination of a predator who would accept nothing less than his prey. "This place used to be neutral ground," Benny whispered, his honey-colored eyes scanning the shadows for threats. "Back when the pack still tried to negotiate instead of simply enforcing boundaries through violence. My grandfather told me stories about the meetings held here." Jenny could almost see it, werewolves in human form gathering around long tables, trying to solve their differences through words instead of claws. Now it was nothing but rust and decay, a monument to failed diplomacy. "How did he find us so quickly?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "The forced bond," Benny replied grimly. "Even dissolved by pack law, it leaves traces. Psychic sense that an obsessed alpha can follow." He touched her cheek gently. "I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this. You couldn't have known." Jenny caught his hand, holding it against her face. "Besides, I'd rather face him with you than spend another day in that stone room." The sound of slow, deliberate clapping echoed through the warehouse, and they both froze. Mark stepped from behind a massive concrete pillar, his appearance even more disheveled than it had been in the meadow. His expensive suit was torn and stained, his dark hair wild, his eyes blazing with a madness that made Jenny's blood run cold. "How touching," Mark said, his voice carrying easily through the empty space. The beta and his stolen mate, making their final stand in the ruins of pack civilization. Benny moved protectively in front of Jenny, his body tense and ready for action. "Mark, this doesn't have to end in violence. Donovan's ruling stands. Jenny is free of your claim." Mark's laughter was harsh and bitter. "Donovan's ruling means nothing. He has no authority over me or my territory. You've both committed treason against pack law, and the penalty is death." "Your pack law," Benny corrected. "Not the true laws that govern our kind. I am the law." Mark roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "I am the alpha, and what I say becomes reality. That's how it's always been, how it always will be." Jenny watched in horrified fascination as Mark began to pace back and forth, his movements predatory and restless. The territorial madness had consumed him completely, leaving behind something that was barely recognizable as the man who had once courted her with flowers and charm. "You know what the beautiful irony is?" Mark continued, his tone conversational despite the madness in his eyes. "I'm going to tell you everything before I kill you. Every detail of how perfectly I planned this, how completely I've won." Behind her back, Jenny felt Benny's hand moving carefully toward his jacket pocket. She shifted slightly to give him cover, keeping her eyes fixed on Mark's face. "Tommy Hendricks was so easy to eliminate," Mark said with obvious pride. "That pathetic excuse for a human thought he could threaten my mate with his little blackmail scheme. I followed him to that alley, used my claws to open his throat, and left him bleeding in the garbage where he belonged." Jenny's stomach clenched with nausea, but she forced herself to remain still. Mark was confessing to murder, and somehow that seemed important. "The note I left was a nice touch, don't you think?" Mark continued. "Any wolf who hunts my mate will face the alpha's justice. I wanted the other packs to know that you were under my protection, that claiming you would mean war." "You framed her for murder," Benny said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I created the perfect trap," Mark corrected. "Jenny had to run to someone for protection, and I made sure that someone was me. The hero arriving just in time to save the damsel in distress." Mark's smile was cold and triumphant. "She came into my den so willingly, so grateful for my help. It was almost too easy." Jenny felt Benny's hand brush against something small and hard in his pocket, some kind of device that he activated with a subtle press of his thumb. She prayed Mark was too lost in his confession to notice. "And the others?" Benny asked. "Isabella, Rosalie, Catherine?" Mark's expression grew dreamy, almost nostalgic. Ah, my beautiful collection. Each one unique, each one perfect in her own way. He moved to lean against a rusty shipping container, settling in as if preparing to tell a favorite story. Isabella was first. So innocent, so trusting. She actually believed I loved her when I forced the mating bond. It took weeks to break her spirit completely, to make her understand that resistance was futile. His eyes grew distant. She lasted 2 months before she tried to escape. I caught her at the territory border and, well, let's just say she learned the price of defiance. Jenny's hands clenched into fists, rage and horror warring in her chest. Those women had been real people, with families and dreams and futures that Mark had stolen. Rosalie was more challenging, Mark continued. She was a fighter, a warrior from the Mountain Pass pack. It took everything I had to subdue her during the claiming ritual, but once the bond was sealed, she belonged to me completely. He pushed away from the container, beginning to pace again. She tried to kill me in my sleep. Can you imagine? Using a silver blade against her own mate. I had to make an example of her, show the others what happened to wives who forgot their place. And Catherine? Benny's voice was barely controlled, his supernatural nature bleeding through in the growl that underscored his words. Catherine was special, Mark said, his tone growing almost tender. She reminded me of you, Jenny. Human, fragile, completely dependent on my protection. She lasted the longest, nearly 6 months before she finally understood that there was no escape. Mark's eyes fixed on Jenny with predatory hunger. But you're going to be even better. You're famous, recognizable, a trophy that will prove my superiority to every alpha in North America. When I mount your head in my study next to the others, they'll know that Mark Bullion takes whatever he wants. The casual way he spoke about their deaths, about his collection of murdered women, made Jenny feel sick. But beneath the horror was a growing sense of rage, for Isabella, Rosalie, and Catherine, for all the lives he destroyed in service to his twisted ego. You're insane, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the warehouse. Mark's smile widened. I'm victorious. There's a difference. He reached inside his jacket and withdrew a gun, not an ordinary weapon, but something that gleamed with an unnatural silver sheen. Jenny had learned enough about werewolf lore to recognize the deadly threat it represented. Silver bullets, Mark explained casually. Blessed by a witch in New Orleans and guaranteed to kill any supernatural creature. I had them specially made after Rosalie's little assassination attempt. Benny tensed, his body beginning the subtle shift that preceded a werewolf transformation. Mark, you don't want to do this. There are laws. Your laws, Mark interrupted, raising the gun. Human laws, pack laws, council laws, none of them apply to me anymore. I make my own rules now. The sound of the safety being released echoed through the warehouse like a death knell. Jenny saw Benny's muscles coil, saw the golden glow beginning to emanate from his eyes as his wolf nature prepared to defend her. I'll kill the beta first, Mark said conversationally. Let you watch him die knowing it's your fault for trying to steal him from his rightful alpha. Then I'll take my time with you, Jenny. Make sure you understand exactly what you've cost me with your defiance. Mark Bullion. The new voice rang with authority that seemed to shake the very foundations of the warehouse. All three of them turned toward the sound. A figure emerged from the shadows near the entrance, an elderly man with silver hair and eyes like winter storms, radiating power that made the air itself seem to vibrate. High Alpha Cornelius Ravencrest, Mark breathed, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Jenny heard fear in his voice. You have confessed to crimes against both human and werewolf law, Cornelius said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The Werewolf Council has heard every word. Mark's gaze darted wildly around the warehouse, and Jenny realized he was only now noticing the small device in Benny's hand, some kind of transmitter that had been broadcasting his confession. You recorded me, Mark snarled, his fury reaching new heights. You treacherous. He swung the gun toward Benny, finger tightening on the trigger. But Benny was already moving, his partial transformation giving him inhuman speed as he threw himself between Mark and Jenny. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. Benny's body jerked as the silver bullet tore through his chest, but his momentum carried him forward into Mark, sending them both crashing into a pile of rusted machinery. "Benny!" Jenny screamed, rushing toward the struggling figures. The gun had been knocked from Mark's grasp, skittering across the concrete floor. Both werewolves were bleeding, Benny from the gunshot wound, Mark from deep claw marks across his face and throat, but they continued to fight with savage determination. Mark's greater alpha strength began to tell as the silver poisoning weakened Benny. He managed to pin the younger werewolf beneath him, hands closing around Benny's throat. "You should have stayed loyal," Mark gasped, his own wounds making his voice harsh. "Should have remembered your place in the pack hierarchy." Jenny didn't think, didn't plan. She simply acted, diving for the fallen gun and wrapping her fingers around the silver-plated grip. The metal burned her human skin, but she held on, pointing the weapon at Mark's back. "Let him go," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Mark looked over his shoulder, his expression shifting from fury to disbelief. "You won't shoot me. You're too weak, too human." "Try me," Jenny replied. For a moment, the warehouse was silent except for the sound of labored breathing. Then Mark smiled, that same cold, predatory expression she'd grown to hate. "You think you've won," he said softly. "But you have no idea what you've unleashed. The council may condemn me, but there are other alphas who share my vision. Werewolves who believe humans exist only to serve us." He released Benny's throat, but instead of surrendering, he lunged sideways toward another weapon, a piece of jagged metal from the broken machinery. Jenny pulled the trigger. The silver bullet caught Mark in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a concrete pillar. He slumped to the ground, his alpha strength finally failing as the silver worked its way through his system. But even dying, his eyes remained fixed on Jenny with obsessive hunger. "You're mine," he whispered. "Death won't change that. I'll find you in whatever comes after, and I'll make you pay for your defiance." "No," said High Alpha Cornelius, approaching Mark's fallen form. "You'll face justice for your crimes, and then you'll face whatever judgment awaits monsters who prey on the innocent." Mark's laughter was weak but filled with malice. "Justice? I am justice. I am." The words cut off as his head fell back against the concrete, his eyes going blank and lifeless. Jenny dropped the gun, her hands shaking as the reality of what she'd done crashed over her. She'd killed someone, ended a life, become something she'd never imagined she could be. But then Benny's voice reached her, weak but alive. "Jenny, come here." She rushed to his side, pressing her hands against the bleeding wound in his chest. The silver had left ugly burns around the entry point, and his breathing was labored, but his honey-colored eyes were alert and focused on her face. "Is it over?" he whispered. Jenny looked around the warehouse, at Mark's lifeless body, at the High Alpha speaking quietly into his own communication device, at the morning sunlight streaming through the broken windows. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It's over." High Alpha Cornelius approached them, his expression grave but not unkind. "Benjamin Bullion, you have acted with honor in protecting the innocent. The council recognizes your actions as justified defense, not rebellion against pack law." Benny tried to sit up, grimacing with pain. "And Jenny?" "Miss Martins is free of all supernatural bonds," Cornelius replied. "The forced mating has been dissolved, and she may choose her own path forward." Jenny met Benny's eyes, seeing the question there that he was too honorable to voice aloud. The answer came from somewhere deep in her heart, from a place that had recognized him as home from the very first moment. "I choose you," she said quietly. "Not because of any supernatural bond or pack law, but because I love you." Benny's smile was radiant despite his injuries. "Even knowing what it means? What we'll face together?" Jenny thought about everything she'd learned, everything she'd endured, everything she'd discovered about herself in the darkest moments. She was stronger than she'd ever imagined, braver than she'd ever dreamed, and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. "Especially knowing that," she replied, and sealed her choice with a kiss that tasted like freedom, like hope, like the beginning of a love worth fighting for. Chapter 8. The controlled chaos outside the warehouse was unlike anything Jenny had ever seen. Police cars with their flashing red and blue lights mixed with unmarked black vehicles that seemed to absorb the morning sunlight. Human authorities worked alongside beings who moved with inhuman grace, their coordination speaking to a partnership that clearly went back years. Jenny sat in the back of an ambulance, watching paramedics work frantically over Benny's still form. The silver poisoning had spread through his system, leaving angry red lines radiating from the bullet wound like spider webs of pain. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale and clammy, but his honey-colored eyes remained focused on her face. "The hospital," he managed to whisper. "St. Sebastian's. Tell them. Dr. Helena Wolfsbane." "I'm not leaving you," Jenny said firmly, gripping his hand despite the paramedics' protests. "Ma'am, we need to." "She comes with me," Benny interrupted, his voice carrying just enough of his beta authority to make the human paramedic step back. "She's my mate." The word still sent a thrill through Jenny's chest, though she was beginning to understand it meant something far more profound in the supernatural world than simple marriage. The connection between them had deepened since Mark's death, as if his forced bond had been the only thing preventing their true recognition from fully manifesting. High Alpha Cornelius appeared at the ambulance door, his silver hair gleaming in the morning light. Beside him stood an elegant woman with dark hair streaked with premature white, her presence radiating the kind of controlled power that spoke to high rank. "Counsel Beta Evangeline Moonwhisper," the woman introduced herself with a slight nod to Jenny. "We'll be handling the supernatural aspects of this case." "And the human authorities?" Jenny asked. "Detective Morrison is an old friend," Cornelius replied. "The NYPD has a specialized unit that handles cases involving our kind. Mark's confession to Tommy Hendricks' murder will be processed through normal channels, while the pack crimes fall under our jurisdiction." The ambulance lurched into motion, sirens wailing as they raced through the city streets. Jenny had never felt more out of her depth, caught between two worlds that operated by completely different rules. "What happens now?" she asked. Evangeline settled into the small space beside them, her movements fluid despite the cramped quarters. "Now we save your mate's life, and then we begin the work of justice." St. Sebastian's Hospital looked ordinary from the outside, just another medical facility in Manhattan's sprawling healthcare system. But as soon as they passed through the emergency doors, Jenny realized this was no normal hospital. The staff moved with supernatural efficiency, and several had eyes that glowed with inhuman light. Dr. Helena Wolfsbane was waiting for them in Trauma Bay 3, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and piercing blue eyes. She wore scrubs, but Jenny caught the scent of herbs and something wilder, forest and moonlight and ancient knowledge. "Silver poisoning, 3rd degree," the paramedic rattled off as they transferred Benny to the hospital gurney. Dr. Wolfsbane's hands moved over Benny's chest, not quite touching but somehow assessing the damage. "How long since exposure?" 23 minutes, Jenny replied automatically. The doctor's eyes flicked to her with something like approval. "Good. That gives us time." She turned to the nursing staff, rattling off orders in a mixture of medical terminology and words Jenny didn't recognize. "Prep Ort 7, and get me a full lunar cycle's worth of moon water. This is going to be delicate." As they wheeled Benny away, Jenny tried to follow, but Dr. Wolfsbane caught her arm gently. "I know you want to stay with him," the doctor said, her voice carrying infinite compassion. "But what I'm about to do requires complete focus. The silver has to be extracted and neutralized before it reaches his heart, and any distraction could be fatal." Jenny felt tears threatening. "How long?" 4 hours, maybe 5. "There's a family waiting room on the 3rd floor specifically for supernatural cases. Counsel Beta Moonwhisper will stay with you." The waiting room was nothing like the sterile spaces Jenny associated with hospitals. Comfortable chairs were arranged around a fireplace that crackled with flames that seemed to burn in colors she'd never seen before. The walls were lined with books, and soft music played from hidden speakers, something that sounded like wind through ancient forests. "This is overwhelming," Jenny said, sinking into one of the chairs. Evangeline settled across from her, her dark eyes understanding. "You've been thrust into our world without preparation or choice. That's traumatic under the best circumstances, and your situation was far from the best. How do you do it? How do you live with one foot in each world? Practice, Evangeline replied with a slight smile. And the understanding that both worlds are stronger when they work together. Humans have qualities we werewolves sometimes lack: innovation, adaptability, the ability to see beyond pack structures. We have strengths that complement yours. She leaned forward, her expression growing serious. What you did today, standing up to Mark, protecting Benny, making the choice to enter our world freely, that takes courage most humans never have to find. I don't feel courageous, Jenny admitted. I feel terrified and out of my depth. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Evangeline said gently. It's acting despite the fear. And you've done that repeatedly. They were interrupted by the arrival of Cornelius, who carried a steaming cup that smelled of herbs and something indefinably comforting. Moon tea, he explained, offering it to Jenny. It will help with the adjustment symptoms. Your body is processing the mate bond, and that can be intense for humans. Jenny accepted the cup gratefully, surprised by how much the warm liquid eased the tension in her muscles. Adjustment symptoms? Enhanced senses, increased emotional sensitivity, occasional precognitive flashes, Cornelius listed matter-of-factly. Nothing dangerous, but it can be disconcerting if you're not prepared. And this is permanent? The bond with Benny is permanent, Evangeline confirmed. But the symptoms will stabilize once your system adapts. Most human mates find the changes beneficial after the initial adjustment period. As if to prove her point, Jenny suddenly became aware of the individual heartbeats of everyone in the room, the subtle scent markers that told her Cornelius had eaten bacon for breakfast and Evangeline was anxious despite her calm exterior. It should have been overwhelming, but instead it felt like having a new sense she'd never known she was missing. Hours passed in a blur of conversation, explanations about werewolf culture, and the gradual education of someone who'd been thrust into a world she'd never imagined. Jenny learned about pack hierarchies, the council's role in governing supernatural communities, and the delicate balance that kept the werewolf world hidden from most humans. What will happen to Mark? She asked as afternoon's shadows began to lengthen. Cornelius's expression grew grave. He'll face trial before the full council for violations of sacred mating laws, murder of pack members from other territories, and abuse of alpha authority. The evidence is overwhelming. We have his recorded confession, witness testimony, and the physical evidence of his crimes. And the sentence? Life imprisonment in Shadowmere Penitentiary, Evangeline replied. It's a supernatural prison designed specifically for werewolves who violated pack law. His alpha powers will be suppressed, and he'll spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. Jenny felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness, relief that Mark could never hurt anyone again, but sadness for the man he might have been if his territorial instincts hadn't twisted into madness. There's another matter we need to discuss, Cornelius said carefully. Mark's business empire. Under pack law, his assets revert to his nearest living relative, which would be Benny. But given the circumstances, I don't want his money, Jenny said immediately. It's not that simple, Evangeline explained. Mark's companies employ hundreds of people, both human and supernatural. His investments support several pack territories. The assets need to be managed responsibly. Jenny considered this, thinking about all the good that could be done with those resources, all the people who might be helped. What if we used them differently? To help other victims? What do you have in mind? A foundation, Jenny said, the idea taking shape as she spoke. Something to help humans who've suffered supernatural abuse, provide legal aid and safe houses, maybe fund research into better integration between our worlds. Cornelius and Evangeline exchanged glances, and Jenny caught the scent of approval. The Moonlight Foundation, Evangeline mused. I like it. Dr. Wolfsbane appeared in the doorway, still wearing her surgical scrubs but with a smile that made Jenny's heart leap. He's going to be fine, the doctor announced. The silver extraction was successful, and his werewolf healing abilities are already working to repair the damage. He should be fully recovered within a week. Jenny was on her feet before the doctor finished speaking. Can I see him? He's in recovery room 12. Still groggy from the anesthesia, but he's been asking for you. The recovery room was dimly lit, machines beeping softly as they monitored Benny's vital signs. He looked pale against the white sheets, but his breathing was strong and steady. When Jenny took his hand, his eyes fluttered open, focusing on her face with obvious effort. "Hey," he whispered, his voice rough from the breathing tube. "Hey yourself," Jenny replied, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot with a silver bullet," Benny said with a weak attempt at humor. "But alive. Thanks to you." "Thanks to Dr. Wolfsbane and werewolf medicine," Jenny corrected. "Thanks to you," Benny repeated firmly. "You saved my life in that warehouse, Jenny. You faced down an alpha werewolf with nothing but courage and a gun you'd never fired before." Jenny settled into the chair beside his bed, never letting go of his hand. "I couldn't lose you. Not when I just found you." "About that," Benny said, his honey-colored eyes growing serious. "I know this isn't the life you planned. Famous actress, normal human existence, predictable future. If you want to walk away." "Stop," Jenny interrupted. "Just stop. I've made my choice, Benny. I choose you, I choose this life, I choose whatever comes next. Together." His smile was radiant. "Even if it means dealing with pack politics and supernatural bureaucracy and the occasional territorial dispute?" "Even then," Jenny confirmed. "Though I might need you to handle the werewolf stuff while I stick to what I know." "Actually," came Evangeline's voice from the doorway, "we were hoping you might consider staying in the entertainment industry. Films that subtly introduce human audiences to supernatural themes, help prepare them for eventual revelation of our existence." Jenny looked from Evangeline to Benny, seeing the hope in both their faces. "You want me to be a supernatural ambassador through acting?" "With Benny as your manager," Cornelius added, appearing beside Evangeline. His beta instincts make him naturally suited for protecting and supporting others, and his knowledge of both worlds would be invaluable. The idea was intriguing, using her platform and talent to build bridges between worlds, to help prepare humanity for the eventual revelation that they weren't alone on this planet. "We'll think about it," Jenny said, squeezing Benny's hand. 6 months later, Jenny stood in the bathroom of their new home, a beautiful house on the border between human and werewolf territories, with gardens that bloomed year-round thanks to supernatural tending. She stared at the pregnancy test in her hand, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. 2 pink lines. Positive. She was carrying Benny's child, a baby that would be part human, part werewolf, a bridge between 2 worlds in the most literal sense possible. "Jenny?" Benny's voice called from the bedroom. "Everything okay?" She emerged from the bathroom, holding the test like a precious treasure. Benny's eyes widened as he took in her expression, then dropped to the test in her hands. "Are you?" he began. "We're having a baby," Jenny said, her voice filled with wonder. "Due right around the next full moon." Benny's whoop of joy could probably be heard 3 blocks away. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around the bedroom while she laughed and protested that he'd make her dizzy. "A pup," he said, setting her down gently and placing his hands on her still flat stomach. "Our pup. Half human," Jenny pointed out. "The best of both worlds," Benny corrected, his eyes shining with love and excitement. Later that evening, they sat on their back porch watching the sun set over the forest that marked the beginning of werewolf territory. Jenny's hand rested on her stomach, already protective of the new life growing there. "What kind of world are we bringing this baby into?" she asked. Benny considered the question seriously. "A complicated one. A world where humans and werewolves are still learning to coexist, where old prejudices die hard and new challenges emerge every day." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "But also a world where love can cross species lines, where courage can overcome any obstacle, where justice is possible even when it seems impossible." Jenny thought about everything that had led to this moment, the terror and pain, but also the love and hope, the discovery of strength she'd never known she possessed, the choice to embrace a life she'd never imagined. "The Moonlight Foundation helped 12 families this month," she said. Humans who'd been caught up in supernatural conflicts, werewolves who'd been abused by corrupt alphas. We're making a difference. Your latest film has been nominated for 3 Academy Awards, Benny added. And the subtle supernatural elements are starting conversations about what else might be out there. Jenny smiled, thinking about the slowly changing world around them. It wasn't perfect, there were still problems to solve, prejudices to overcome, bridges to build. But it was better than it had been, and it would continue to improve. I think, she said softly, we're bringing our baby into a world full of hope. The full moon was rising over the forest, painting everything in silver light. Jenny felt the baby flutter inside her, too early for most women to feel movement, but werewolf pups developed faster than human babies. I love you, Benny said, his voice carrying all the wonder and gratitude of someone who'd found his true mate against impossible odds. I love you too, Jenny replied, and sealed the promise with a kiss under the moonlight. Their child would be born into a world where anything was possible, where love conquered fear, where humans and werewolves could build a future together. It was a world worth fighting for, worth hoping for, worth believing in. And as the full moon reached its zenith, Jenny felt their baby's first strong kick, a sign of life, of hope, of the beautiful complexity that was their shared future. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more.